The United States is often thought of as a united country. It's literally in the name of it. But in the mid 1800s, all of that would change, and this would eventually lead to secession. The country was splitting into two different pieces. One of them, the North, was an industrial society that mostly needed factory labor, but didn't depend on slaves. The South was the other region. This region was an agricultural, mostly cotton and tobacco producing area. The South had large plantations that depended on slaves to operate. Compromises and laws began to pop up. The North and the South were trying to keep their balance and power in the Senate/House. The first compromise that I'll talk about is the Compromise of 1850. The Compromise of 1850 was a major compromise in U.S. history. It had California as a free state, and it also introduced the Fugitive Slave Act, which was a stronger version of an earlier act. The Fugitive Slave Act allowed Southerners to come into the North and recapture escaped slaves. The Underground Railroad was a way for slaves to escape the South and go to the North, or preferably Canada. Now we jump ahead to 1854, when the Republican Party is formed. It's a party that is against slavery, and it shows by looking at the candidates that were chosen for the party. Something else that happened in 1854 was a Democratic senator from Illinois, Stephen Douglas, wanted to build a railroad across Kansas and Nebraska. He wanted the territories of Kansas and Nebraska to allow slavery, but other people wanted to have a vote, which is called popular sovereignty, on whether slavery should be illegal in Kansas and Nebraska. So people from the North and the South flocked to Kansas to vote. Tensions were starting to rise in the territories. People from the North were fighting the people from the South. Violence broke out, and this event was named Bleeding Kansas. About 55 people died in Bleeding Kansas. A man named John Brown, a radical abolitionist, wanted to get revenge on the pro-slavery men. So at night, John Brown and some of his men snuck onto someone's property and proceeded to beat them to death with blunt broadswords. John Brown was later tried and hanged. A lot of bad things were happening in the U.S. at this time. There were people getting killed, and all of it was over the issue of slavery. But a lot of people in the North didn't truly understand what slaves were living like. People like Harriet Beecher Stowe showed how bad slavery was. In her case, Harriet wrote a book called Uncle Tom's Cabin, which showed the horrors of slavery. In 1860, there was an election. This election had the following candidates: Abraham Lincoln, representing the Republican Party; John Bell in the Constitutional Union Party; John Breckinridge in the Southern Democratic Party; and Stephen Douglas in the Northern Democratic Party. The person who won the election was Abraham Lincoln, becoming the 16th President of the United States. This upset a lot of people in the South, but it was crucial for the North, what was to come. A little while earlier, before 1860, states in the South said that if a Republican candidate was elected in 1860, secession would be a certainty. This meant that secession would come soon, and it did. The first state to secede was South Carolina on December 20th, 1860. Then Mississippi, Florida, Alabama, Georgia, Louisiana, Texas, Virginia, Arkansas, North Carolina, and finally Tennessee on June 8th, 1861, completing the Confederate States of America. And bad things were to come. On April 12th, 1861, Confederate troops opened fire on Fort Sumter in South Carolina. This would mark the beginning of the Civil War, the bloodiest conflict in U.S. history that would rage until 1865. The war almost destroyed both the North and the South. Around 700,000 soldiers died fighting in the Civil War. Slavery was finally abolished after the war, and Lincoln was going to celebrate at a play with his wife. About 2 blocks away, a man named John Wilkes Booth was in a bar, drinking some beer, and John snuck into the theater, and when the audience's laughter rose in volume, John pulled the trigger on his pistol. Lincoln was shot in the head. He was taken to a building nearby, and doctors said there was nothing they could do to save him. Lincoln died shortly after. John Wilkes Booth was killed 11 days later.